But can you give us a tip, Joe, on just maybe hypertrophy, strength, power, and speed, and just
sure.
Just one simple tip that we can
So,
share.
starting with, say, the speed and power, because again, that's the physical quality we lose first and most of those, the next three that we're going to talk about. Like I mentioned, if you look at like the Masters, just to kind of back that, go look at the Masters track and field records, like the 100-meter record for over 40, over 50, over 60. And
it's like 4 minutes, right?
It's like, it's not far off. Like if you look at the performances and then look at, say powerlifting, some dudes are peaking in their late 30s, even early 40s, right? They're winning the open division, and at 50 you still got some pretty strong dudes. It's much, and yeah, of course it starts to drop off, but I just think that's a great real world example. Look at powerlifting Masters records versus sprint Masters records.
Well, that's a good point.
And it is
point. No one ever says like, you hear people saying mature muscle in bodybuilding and powerlifting. No one ever is like, oh, he's got a mature speed.
There's no mature speed.
No.
Mature speed is you're sitting on the sidelines watching. Yeah. So I just, I always like the real world stuff. So that's just a cool, if for those who are interested, just go check that out. It's pretty interesting. But speaking of that speed aspect that we do just have a tendency to lose so much, it's also the area that I think when people try to maintain it or gain it as they age, you're most likely to get injured, because how many people, I haven't sprinted or I haven't played basketball since high school or college. Now they're 40. They go just try to jump into a pickup basketball game and they blow their Achilles out. You can't just jump back into sprinting, jumping, or anything explosive. It's super important to not neglect it. But if you have neglected it, I think the best quick advice I could give on a podcast conversation like this is just think low risk, high reward type of exercises. So, I've kind of been known as someone, we've all loved the sled training forever. I think that's a perfect example. You want to start reintroducing sprints back into your program. Don't just go out and run a 40-yard dash or a 100-meter dash. You're going to end up pulling your hamstring. Or you're tearing something. Did you guys see Kevin Hart a couple months ago when he pulled his
tore his adductor?
That both adductors. He's in a wheelchair for weeks.
I mean,
he did a sprint.
But you gotta look. I don't know there was one video. I think he took him. He must have had them all taken down.
He scrubbed the internet.
Absolutely. There's one video of a cell phone camera of him racing his buddy, and he tears one adductor, and then with the next step tears the other one. He was in a wheelchair for weeks, if not months. It was really bad.
Yeah.
But perfect example of don't just start sprinting.
He's in his 40s, right? But he works out, but he's
yes. That's why I'd say it's and I not to make fun of the guy because he's fine now, but it was a pretty bad, he was in a wheelchair for a couple weeks, if not months. But I think he's a great example because he's a workout guy. He's in phenomenal shape, works out every day, the whole thing. He lifts, he does, cardio, but he doesn't clearly sprint often. And then look what happened. And he's in better shape than 99% of the 40-year-olds out there. So don't think you're going to get away with just jumping right back into things. So you would want to, just one of many examples, maybe you lightly load a sled or a prowler and you quote unquote sprint with that, whether you kind of push it and run with it or you strap it to your waist with a rope or a sled strap and you sprint that way. What that's going to do is reduce your speed drastically from a regular flat out sprint, right? So the potential of you pulling an adductor, pulling a hamstring is way reduced, but it's a great workout from an effort standpoint. It's still going to be kind of hard, but because you're leaning on that sled, or if the sled's behind you and you're you have the weight strapped around your waist. You're able to kind of lean, and the sled offsets some of your weight. So from an effort standpoint, it's hard, but as far as potential for pulling a muscle, it reduces exponentially. So one of like the best ways to reintroduce speed training is running with a sled, running up a hill. Again, effort wise, it's going to be kind of difficult, but because your speed is reduced, way less injuries and pulled muscles running up a hill versus running on flat ground. And both of those are great because they actually reinforce proper mechanics, acceleration mechanics. So if you're interested, which you should be, because the better, you don't have to, study sprint mechanics like you're an Olympic sprinter. But if you could clean up your technique a little bit and run more efficiently as you continue progressing with your speed training and incorporating sprints, you'll be less likely to pull a muscle when your technique is on point. So just an example of how to maybe reintroduce speed into your programming. It jumps same way. Think low risk, high reward. And the best single piece of advice I could probably give is start with extensive jumps, not intensive jumps. So something like jumping rope or in place pogo jumps, that's extensive, right? It's not super intense. You're really preparing the soft tissue, the Achilles tendon for more intense, single effort jumps or multiple jumps. If you're going to do hurdle hops or something like that down the road, you don't just want to start with that. You want to start with light, in place, longer duration types of jumps, which again aren't sexy. It's not going to get you a ton of likes on Instagram, you doing some pogo jumps or jumping rope, but that will prepare your body for then, I would say, you progress to jumping onto something like a box jump. And then eventually you're doing you could do things like hurdle hops and reactive, more intense jumps. But just like you wouldn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think it was you that opened my eyes to the fact that when someone jumps on a box, obviously, we all understand it's a lower impact exercise because you're landing at the apex. But the other thing is the height of the box doesn't change the height of the hips. It's just about how quickly you can bring your feet up. But we have clients, well into their 70s who have done very low level jumps, like on a 45-pound bumper, and if you look at the height of their hips versus, a 30-year-old client who's jumping on a 20-inch box, not that they're super close, like they're pretty close, a lot closer than you'd think.
As soon as you're of the hips, right?
Yeah, it's like the distance of their hips from the ground.
Absolutely, which you don't need. It's not about, exactly to your point. You could displace your hips more each week and keep jumping on the 45-pound bumper plate. Just
right.
My cue is always, hey, try to clear it by more than you did last week. Think like a rainbow. Jump up and then land in the center of that bumper plate, or a 6-inch or 12-inch box. You could still, from a effort standpoint, try to jump as high as you can and then come down, land soft, as opposed to highest possible box and you're just doing whatever it takes to get your feet up there. Because I've had some great box jumpers that when you watch the video, I mean, there's dudes, 50-inch box jump, but if you watch their hips, they may only move maybe 6 to 8 inches. They just have great hip mobility, which is great. Like, again, it all depends. It depends on your goals. What are you doing the exercise for? There's more nuance to it. But for general pop, and if you're programming box jumps because you're trying to maintain or gain the ability for your body to just move quickly, from a risk reward standpoint, pick a box that you can clear in your sleep and just try to displace your hips, as Obi said, and clear that box by as much as possible. So almost like you're about to jump over it, and then you jump up and clear it by 12 inches and then land in the center, nice and soft, step down, repeat. You're going to get way more out of that type of box jump and see way less injuries.
That's brilliant.
Calvin started with a new woman yesterday, and he was taking her through the assessment and her first workout, and she was watching one of our high school athletes doing box jumps, and she was like, please don't ever make me do that. My friend trained at another gym. And it was funny because I knew exactly what she was going to say, and Calvin interrupted her and knew what she was going to say also. He goes, let me guess, CrossFit class, and she ended up skinning her shins, and she thought it was like, you know, a mind reader. Like, how do you know her? Like, how did you know what I was about to say? He goes, it's very common. And that's just the example of way too high of a box with the wrong population for the wrong reason. And that's why you can't just make the claim, are box jumps good or bad? There's nuance to everything. Why are you programming it? How are you programming it? Etc. So there is a very, very safe way to program box jumps for longevity purposes. And then finally, for strength and hypertrophy, I just kind of clump them together for the purpose of this podcast. We have, I think I put together 12 longevity laws that we're going to be kind of covering at the seminar. But the first one I already mentioned, if it hurts, either don't do it or find out why it hurts and make the changes so it doesn't hurt. If something hurts because you're so immobile, you can't get in the proper position, I don't want to give the impression where we're saying, oh, just don't do it, ignore it, and move on to something else. Yes, there's always another option, and you can continue training that pattern, that movement, whatever it is. But I still think it's important to figure out, why did that exercise hurt? Let me try to correct that so it doesn't hurt and I don't end up causing more problems down the road. With that being said, that goes hand in hand with kind of longevity law number 2, which we already touched on a bit, which is there are no mandatory exercises. I think you can't overstate that one. You can't talk about that enough. If we all talked about it on every podcast, I still don't think it would be enough, because people need to hear it more. You do not have to just mimic what other people are doing. There's no hard rules saying every upper body session has to start with a barbell bench press, or every lower body session has to start with a barbell squat. There are so many different specific exercises to choose from, and we all get caught up in that, where the important thing is you just want to make sure, for a well-rounded longevity-based program, yes, you want to be incorporating the foundational movement patterns in your program. A squat, a hinge, a lunge, an upper body push, an upper body pull, some kind of a carry or a drag. I do think it's important to incorporate those patterns, but the specific exercise you choose, or exercises you choose for each, does not freaking matter, especially as you get older. If you're not competing in powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting or a sport, it doesn't matter if it's a machine bench press, a dumbbell bench press, a weighted push-up. Just train those patterns, strengthen them, progress over time, and you're going to be ahead of 99% of the population.